Ethan Carter was no stranger to hard work. At 35, he had spent the better part of his adult life doing whatever it took to provide for his son, Liam. A mechanic by trade, Ethan spent his days fixing cars at a local garage and his nights delivering groceries to make ends meet. Despite the long hours and constant stress, he never complained, at least not in front of Liam. His boy deserved happiness, even if life hadn't always been kind to them. Their small apartment wasn't much, but it was home. The walls were thin, the furniture worn, and the fridge often embarrassingly empty. Yet, somehow, Ethan managed to keep things running smoothly, or as smoothly as possible on a shoestring budget. Liam, bright-eyed and curious at 8 years old, didn't seem to mind their circumstances too much. He loved superheroes, building Lego towers that teetered precariously, and asking endless questions about why they couldn't afford vacations or fancy gadgets like some of his classmates. "Why don't we have a big house like Jake's family?" Liam had asked one evening while they ate mac and cheese straight from the pot. Ethan smiled, ruffling his son's messy brown hair. "Because we're saving up for something even better," he said with a wink. "Like adventures." Liam tilted his head thoughtfully. "What kind of adventures?" "The best kind," Ethan replied, though he knew the answer was vague. Truthfully, most of their so-called adventures involved weekend trips to the park or movie nights with rented DVDs. But Ethan believed in dreaming big, even when reality felt suffocating. One rainy evening, as Ethan drove home from his late-night delivery shift, the storm outside mirrored the chaos in his mind. Rain pelted the windshield, and the wipers struggled to keep up. Streetlights blurred through sheets of water, casting eerie halos onto the slick pavement. Just as Ethan turned onto the quieter stretch of road leading toward their neighborhood, something caught his eye. A dark shape huddled near the curb. Slowing down, he squinted through the rain. It was a wheelchair-accessible van pulled off to the side, its hazard lights blinking weakly. Beside it sat a woman in a wheelchair, her hood drawn tightly over her head to shield against the downpour. Next to her stood a little girl, clutching a stuffed bunny, her tiny frame shivering in the cold. Without hesitation, Ethan pulled over. He grabbed his emergency kit from the trunk and approached cautiously, calling out above the rain. "Are you okay? Need some help?" The woman looked up, startled, before nodding gratefully. Her voice trembled as she explained the situation. A flat tire had stranded them, and she lacked the tools or strength to fix it herself. The girl clung to her mother's wheelchair, wide-eyed and silent. "I've got this," Ethan assured them, already crouching beside the van. As he worked, the woman introduced herself as Claire and her daughter as Sophie. Though soaked and exhausted, Ethan couldn't help noticing the quiet dignity in Claire's demeanor, and the way Sophie peeked curiously at him, her fear slowly melting into curiosity. By the time the tire was fixed, Ethan's clothes were drenched, and his hands were smeared with grease. Claire thanked him profusely, offering money, which he refused. "Just glad I could help," he said simply, smiling at Sophie before climbing back into his car. As Ethan drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror, catching one last glimpse of Claire and Sophie waving goodbye. Little did he know, that chance encounter would change both their lives forever. The rain showed no signs of letting up as Ethan knelt beside the van, his fingers stiff from the cold but steady as he worked. Claire watched him intently, her hands gripping the wheels of her chair tightly. Despite the discomfort and the awkwardness of being stranded on the side of a deserted road, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of relief at his presence. There was something reassuring about the way he moved with confidence, even in the pouring rain. "This shouldn't take too long," Ethan said over his shoulder, his voice calm despite the storm raging around them. He glanced briefly at Sophie, who stood silently beside her mother, clutching her stuffed bunny like a lifeline. "Hey there, kiddo. You okay?" Sophie nodded shyly, though her wide eyes betrayed her lingering fear. She looked between Ethan and her mom, unsure whether to trust the stranger who had appeared out of nowhere. But when Ethan smiled warmly and added, "Don't worry, we'll get you two back on the road in no time," she relaxed slightly, inching closer to watch him work. Claire sighed softly, leaning back in her wheelchair. "Thank you for stopping," she said, her tone sincere. Most people would have just driven past. Ethan shrugged, wiping water from his face with the sleeve of his jacket. Couldn't leave you out here like this. Not with the little one scared and all. He paused, glancing at the van's license plate. You live nearby? Or are you headed somewhere specific? We're actually visiting family, Claire replied, adjusting the blanket draped over her lap. But we got delayed earlier today, and now, well, this happened. She gestured toward the flat tire with a rueful smile. Guess I should have checked it before leaving. No worries, Ethan assured her. These things happen. His hands worked quickly, loosening bolts and swapping out the damaged tire for the spare. Though his movements were efficient, he made sure to keep the conversation light, sensing that Claire and Sophie needed distraction more than anything else. So, what's your superhero's name? Ethan asked Sophie suddenly, nodding toward the bunny clutched in her arms. Every hero needs a cool alias. Sophie blinked, startled by the question. After a moment's hesitation, she whispered, Bunny Blaze. Bunny Blaze, huh? Ethan repeated, feigning awe. That sounds pretty epic. What powers does Bunny Blaze have? She can fly, Sophie murmured, her voice gaining strength as she warmed to the topic. And she protects kids who are scared. Well, that's good timing, Ethan said with a grin. Sounds like Bunny Blaze saved the day already. Sophie giggled softly, finally stepping forward to peer curiously at the tools scattered around Ethan's feet. For the first time since their ordeal began, the tension in her small frame eased. Claire watched the exchange with quiet gratitude, marveling at how effortlessly Ethan connected with her daughter. It wasn't just his kindness. It was his ability to make them feel safe, even in such an uncertain moment. When the tire was finally secured, Ethan stood up, brushing off his hands. All set, he announced, giving the van a quick once-over to ensure everything was in working order. You should be good to go now. Claire exhaled deeply, visibly relieved. I don't know how to thank you, she said earnestly. If you hadn't stopped. It's no big deal, Ethan interrupted, waving off her gratitude. Just glad I could help. Still, Claire insisted on offering him money, pulling a damp bill from her wallet. Ethan shook his head firmly. Really, ma'am, it's fine. Just doing my part. Claire hesitated, clearly unused to having her offers declined. At least let me pay for your trouble, she pressed. Please, it's the least I can do. Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head again. No payment necessary. Take care of yourself and the little one. All right? With that, he turned to gather his tools, leaving Claire speechless. Before climbing back into his car, he crouched down to Sophie's level, offering her a playful salute. Stay brave, okay? Bunny Blaze Protector? Looks like you've got everything under control. Sophie beamed, clutching her bunny tighter. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. As Ethan drove away, Claire watched his taillights disappear into the darkness, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She'd encountered countless people during her life, some kind, others indifferent, but none quite like Ethan. There was something genuine about him, something that lingered long after he was gone. Mommy, he was nice, Sophie said quietly, breaking the silence. Claire nodded, smiling faintly. Yes, sweetheart. He was very nice. As they resumed their journey home, Claire found herself replaying the encounter in her mind. Who was this man who refused payment, who went out of his way to comfort a frightened child, who seemed utterly unaffected by wealth or status? Something about him intrigued her, not just his actions, but the quiet strength behind them. Little did Ethan know, Claire wasn't just any stranded motorist. Beneath her modest demeanor lay a fortune vast enough to change lives, including his own. But for now, she kept that truth hidden, content to simply reflect on the unexpected act of kindness that had brightened an otherwise dreary evening. Back at her sprawling estate, Claire sat in her home office, gazing out the large window that overlooked manicured gardens and a sparkling pool. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a fresh, earthy scent that wafted through the open balcony doors. Despite the luxury surrounding her, Claire felt uneasy. a rare sensation for someone who had grown accustomed to privilege. Her mind kept drifting back to Ethan. His calloused hands, his easy smile, the way he'd spoken to Sophie, as if she were the most important person in the world. It wasn't just his kindness that stuck with her. It was the authenticity of it. In her experience, people often acted out of obligation or expectation, especially when they discovered her last name was Bennett. But Ethan hadn't known who she was, and yet, he'd treated her like anyone else. No judgment, no ulterior motives. Just pure, unfiltered decency. Curiosity got the better of her. Later that night, after tucking Sophie into bed, Claire opened her laptop and began searching online. She typed in vague details, mechanic, delivery driver, and their town's name, hoping to find some trace of him. To her surprise, it didn't take long. A local news article from 2 years prior mentioned Ethan Carter, praising him for helping rebuild cars donated to low-income families. Another post highlighted his volunteer work mentoring at-risk teens. As she scrolled through snippets of information, Claire pieced together more about Ethan's life. He was a single father raising an 8-year-old son named Liam. They lived in a modest apartment near the outskirts of town. Reviews on social media raved about his reliability as a mechanic, while neighbors described him as hardworking and kind. One commenter even joked, "If you need something fixed, Ethan's your guy, but don't expect him to charge much. The man's too humble for his own good." Claire leaned back in her chair, absorbing what she'd learned. Here was a man juggling 2 jobs, raising a child alone, and still finding time to help strangers stranded on rainy nights. And yet, he clearly struggled financially. She thought about how easily he could have accepted her offer of money but chose not to. Why? Because he didn't see helping others as a transaction. It was simply part of who he was. The realization stirred something deep within her. Growing up as the daughter of tech billionaire Margaret Bennett, Claire had always been shielded from hardship. Her father, the founder of Bennett Technologies, had built an empire that spanned continents. But success came at a cost. Margaret's relentless drive for perfection left little room for warmth or flexibility. When Claire rebelled against the rigid expectations placed upon her, choosing art school over business degrees, refusing arranged networking events, her relationship with her mother grew strained. Then came the accident. 5 years ago, a car crash left Claire paralyzed from the waist down. While physical therapy allowed her to regain some independence, the emotional scars ran deeper. Her mother's reaction only worsened matters. Instead of offering support, Margaret saw Claire's injury as another failure, a sign of weakness. Their already fragile bond shattered completely when Claire rejected her mother's attempts to control her recovery process. Since then, Claire had distanced herself from the family fortune, choosing instead to live modestly off a trust fund. She rarely attended high-profile events or flaunted her wealth. For once, she wanted to be seen for who she truly was, not what her surname represented. Yet, here she was again, hiding behind anonymity while learning about Ethan's struggles without revealing her own reality. Over the next few days, Claire found herself thinking about Ethan constantly. She wondered how he managed to stay so positive despite the challenges life threw his way. More than that, she wanted to help, but discreetly, without overshadowing the dignity he carried so naturally. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. One afternoon, while shopping for groceries, Claire noticed Ethan stocking shelves at a nearby store during one of his delivery breaks. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes betraying the toll of working non-stop. On impulse, Claire struck up a conversation, pretending to browse the aisle casually. "Hey, aren't you the guy who helped me and my daughter the other night?" she asked, feigning recognition. Ethan glanced up, surprised. "Oh, hi. Yeah, that was me. How's your van holding up?" "It's great, thanks to you," Claire replied warmly. "Listen, I feel bad about not being able to thank you properly. If there's ever anything you need, repairs, errands, anything, I'd love to return the favor." Ethan shook his head, chuckling softly. "Really, ma'am, it's fine. Just glad I could help." Claire smiled, undeterred. "Well, maybe someday I'll get lucky enough to repay the universe for sending you our way." Though Ethan dismissed her offer, Claire quietly began looking for ways to assist him without drawing attention. She sent anonymous gift cards to his grocery store account, ensuring Liam never went hungry. When his aging car broke down, she arranged for a mechanic friend to fix it free of charge, claiming it was a random act of goodwill. Each gesture was small yet meaningful, designed to ease his burdens without making him feel beholden to anyone. Meanwhile, Liam and Sophie became fast friends. After running into each other at the park one sunny Saturday, the two children bonded over shared interests in superheroes and silly jokes. Soon, playdates became a regular occurrence, giving Claire and Ethan more opportunities to interact. During these encounters, Claire admired Ethan's patience and humor, qualities she realized were rare in someone carrying so much responsibility. For Ethan, these moments provided a welcome reprieve from the daily grind. Though he remained oblivious to Claire's true identity, he couldn't deny the growing connection between them. There was something comforting about her presence, her quiet strength, her genuine interest in his life. As their friendship blossomed, neither could foresee how their paths would soon collide in unexpected ways. As weeks turned into months, the bond between Claire and Ethan deepened in ways neither of them anticipated. What began as casual conversations during Liam and Sophie's playdates evolved into heartfelt discussions about life, parenthood, and dreams deferred. For Ethan, these interactions offered a rare chance to open up about his struggles without fear of judgment. For Claire, they provided a glimpse into a world she'd never truly understood, one defined by resilience rather than privilege. One Saturday afternoon, while supervising the kids at the park, Ethan found himself sitting beside Claire on a bench, watching Liam and Sophie chase each other around the playground. The sun was warm on his face, a welcome contrast to the chilly worries that often weighed him down. He glanced at Claire, who seemed lost in thought, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You ever think about what you'd do if money wasn't an issue?" Ethan asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Claire blinked, startled by the question. "What do you mean?" "I dunno," Ethan said with a shrug, twirling a blade of grass between his fingers. "Like, if you didn't have bills or responsibilities holding you back, what would you spend your time doing?" Claire hesitated, considering the answer. In truth, she'd spent years avoiding this very question. Her mother had always dictated her path, first through expectations, then through guilt after the accident. But now, sitting here with Ethan, she allowed herself to imagine possibilities beyond her gilded cage. "I guess I'd travel more," she admitted softly. "See parts of the world I've only read about. Maybe teach art to kids who don't have access to it." She paused, glancing at Sophie, who was giggling as Liam spun her in circles. "And spend even more time with Sophie, obviously." Ethan nodded, smiling faintly. "That sounds nice. Me? I'd fix things, not just cars, but stuff that actually matters, like broken schools or community centers. Give people spaces where they can dream bigger, you know?" Claire looked at him, struck by the simplicity of his ambition. It wasn't fame or fortune he craved, it was purpose. Here was a man who worked tirelessly to provide for his son, yet still dreamed of giving back to others. His humility was magnetic, drawing her closer despite her usual reservations about forming attachments. Their connection grew stronger outside of the park too. Claire continued finding subtle ways to support Ethan, all while maintaining her anonymity. When Liam mentioned wanting a new backpack for school, Claire discreetly dropped one off at their doorstep under the guise of a neighborly gift. When Ethan's landlord threatened to raise the rent, she arranged for an anonymous donor to cover the difference. Though Ethan suspected nothing, Liam started noticing patterns. "Dad, why does good stuff keep happening to us?" Liam asked one evening as they unpacked groceries delivered by a local charity, an initiative secretly funded by Claire. Ethan laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Luck, buddy. Sometimes the universe decides to cut us a break." But Liam wasn't convinced. "It feels like someone's helping us. Like, maybe mommy's looking out for us from heaven." The comment caught Ethan off guard, tugging at emotions he'd buried long ago. His late wife, Rachel, had passed away when Liam was just a baby, leaving him to navigate fatherhood alone. While he rarely spoke of her, Moments like this reminded him how deeply her absence shaped their lives. Meanwhile, Claire wrestled with her own emotions. The more time she spent with Ethan and Liam, the harder it became to hide her wealth. She admired Ethan's pride and independence, yet part of her longed to reveal the truth, to share the resources at her disposal openly. Still, she feared ruining the fragile trust they'd built. Would Ethan see her differently if he knew? Would he pull away? Her internal conflict came to a head during a rainy afternoon at her home. Ethan had brought Liam over to play with Sophie, and the storm forced them to stay longer than planned. As the kids settled in the living room with board games, Claire invited Ethan into the kitchen for coffee. "This place is amazing," Ethan remarked, glancing around the spacious room adorned with modern appliances and artwork. "You must be doing pretty well for yourself." Claire tensed slightly, unsure how to respond. "I get by," she said evasively, pouring steaming coffee into mugs. "How about you? Any luck fixing that squeaky door hinge at your apartment?" Ethan chuckled, accepting the mug. "Nah, I haven't had time. Between work and keeping Liam entertained, my to-do list keeps growing." Claire hesitated, then blurted out, "If you want, I could send someone over to take care of it. My treat." Ethan raised an eyebrow, surprised by the offer. "Thanks, but I'll manage. Besides, I kinda like doing those things myself. Feels rewarding, you know?" His response filled Claire with admiration and guilt. Here she was, hiding behind privilege, while Ethan embraced every challenge with quiet determination. She realized then that their differences weren't just financial, they were philosophical. Where she sought control, he embraced chaos. Where she feared vulnerability, he thrived on authenticity. As the rain eased and the kids begged to go outside, Claire watched Ethan chase after Liam and Sophie, laughing as they splashed in puddles. For the first time in years, she felt a pang of envy. Not for his circumstances, but for the joy he radiated despite them. And in that moment, she resolved to stop hiding. Not completely, not yet, but enough to let him see her as she truly was. Flawed, hopeful, and yearning for connection. Just as Claire began contemplating revealing her true identity to Ethan, an unexpected storm brewed. Not in the skies, but within her family. Margaret Bennett, Claire's overbearing mother, had grown increasingly suspicious of her daughter's frequent disappearances. For years, Margaret had tried to micromanage Claire's life, insisting she return to the family business and act like a proper Bennett. When rumors reached her ears about Claire spending time with a mechanic and his son, she decided it was time to intervene. One crisp morning, Margaret arrived unannounced at Claire's estate, her sharp heels clicking against the marble floors as she strode inside. Sophie was coloring at the kitchen table, while Claire sipped tea, reviewing sketches for a charity project she wanted to launch. The sight of her mother sent a jolt of dread through Claire. "Margaret," Claire greeted coolly, rising from her chair. "What brings you here?" "I could ask you the same question," Margaret replied, her tone clipped. She glanced pointedly at Sophie before lowering her voice. "We need to talk privately." Claire sighed, ushering her mother into the study. Once the door was closed, Margaret wasted no time cutting to the chase. "Who is he?" she demanded, her piercing gaze locking onto Claire's. "He," Claire repeated, feigning ignorance. "The mechanic," Margaret snapped, slamming a folder onto the desk. Inside were photos and documents compiled by private investigators she'd hired to dig into Claire's recent activities. "This Ethan Carter, you've been seeing him regularly. Why?" Claire's heart sank as she flipped through the contents of the folder. Photos of Ethan fixing her van, candid shots of her and Ethan talking at the park, even images of Liam and Sophie playing together, all meticulously documented. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the folder aside. "It's not what you think," Claire said firmly, though her voice betrayed a flicker of unease. "Ethan helped me when I needed it. We're friends, that's all." "Friends?" Margaret scoffed, crossing her arms. "Do you really expect me to believe that? You've distanced yourself from everyone who matters. Family, colleagues, society, and now you're associating with someone so far beneath your station? What are you trying to prove?" "It's not about proving anything," Claire shot back, her temper flaring. Ethan's a good man. He works hard, takes care of his son, and treats people with respect. Something I wish I could say about everyone in our station. Maybe if you spent less time obsessing over status and more time caring about actual human beings, you'd understand. Margaret's expression hardened, her lips thinning into a grim line. Don't lecture me, Claire. I know how the world works. People like him wouldn't hesitate to exploit you if they knew who you were. Is that what you want? To throw away everything we've built for some fleeting infatuation? It's not infatuation, Claire retorted, her cheeks flushing with anger. And I'm not throwing anything away. For once, I'm living my life on my terms, not yours. If that means befriending someone who's kind and genuine, then so be it. The argument escalated, each word slicing deeper than the last. Margaret accused Claire of being reckless and naive, while Claire fired back, accusing her mother of being cold and manipulative. By the end of their confrontation, both women were exhausted, but neither budged from their stance. Unwilling to let the matter rest, Margaret took matters into her own hands. She arranged for one of her lawyers to approach Ethan under the guise of a concerned citizen, offering him a substantial sum of money to stay away from Claire. The lawyer framed it as a business opportunity, suggesting Ethan use the funds to start his own garage or move to a better neighborhood. When Ethan received the offer, a check for $50,000, he was baffled. "What's this for?" he asked, staring at the envelope as though it might bite him. "It's a gesture of goodwill," the lawyer explained smoothly. "From someone who admires your work ethic and wants to ensure you can focus on providing for your son without distractions." "Distractions?" Ethan echoed, suspicion creeping into his voice. "What does this have to do with me helping Claire and Sophie?" The lawyer hesitated, clearly unprepared for Ethan's directness. "Let's just say, certain parties believe your paths shouldn't cross further. No offense intended. It's purely a matter of practicality." Ethan's jaw tightened as realization dawned. Someone, likely Claire's family, was trying to buy him off, assuming he'd jump at the chance for easy money. But instead of feeling tempted, he felt insulted. Did they really think so little of him? "Tell whoever sent you that I don't need handouts," Ethan said firmly, handing the check back. "And tell them I'll decide who I spend my time with, not them." Meanwhile, Claire faced challenges of her own. Margaret's interference created tension between her and Ethan, albeit indirectly. When Ethan started receiving anonymous gifts again, this time larger and more frequent, he grew wary. Though grateful for the assistance, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "Someone's meddling, Claire," Ethan said during one of their conversations, his frustration evident. "First the job offers, now this. I don't like being in debt to people I don't even know." Claire's heart sank as she realized her mother's actions were causing harm where she'd only meant to help. Desperate to make things right, she finally decided it was time to come clean. But before she could gather the courage, another obstacle arose. Ethan's landlord issued an eviction notice due to unpaid rent. Faced with the possibility of losing their home, Ethan weighed difficult options, including relocating to a cheaper area, an idea Claire desperately hoped to prevent. In a moment of quiet resolve, Claire paid off Ethan's debt anonymously once more, knowing full well it might deepen his suspicions. Yet, as much as she hated hiding behind secrecy, she couldn't bear to see him struggle any longer. The conflict within her reached a breaking point, forcing her to confront an uncomfortable truth. Keeping her identity hidden was no longer protecting their friendship. It was threatening to destroy it. The breaking point came on a chilly autumn evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Ethan's apartment. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the latest anonymous payment receipt, tucked inside an envelope marked, "Courtesy of a friend." The gesture was generous, too generous, but it left him feeling uneasy. For weeks, he'd been piecing together clues. The sudden job offers, the unexplained gifts, the eviction notice miraculously resolved overnight. Someone was pulling strings, and Ethan hated not knowing who or why. Liam walked in, holding his phone. "Dad, look at this," he said, showing Ethan a news article he'd stumbled upon during a school research project. The headline read, Bennett heiress Claire Bennett champions local art programs for underprivileged youth. Beneath it was a photo of Claire, smiling warmly at a community event, Sophie by her side. Ethan froze, his eyes widening as realization dawned. "That's her," he murmured, pointing to the screen. "Claire." Liam tilted his head, confused. "What do you mean? You know her?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, determination etched into his features. "Stay here, buddy. I need to figure something out." By the time Ethan arrived at Claire's estate, night had fallen, and the sprawling property was bathed in soft golden light from outdoor lamps. He hesitated briefly before ringing the doorbell, his mind racing with questions. When Claire opened the door, surprise flickered across her face. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" she asked, stepping aside to let him in. "I think you know why I'm here," Ethan replied, his tone calm but firm. He held up his phone, displaying the article Liam had found. "Care to explain?" Claire sighed deeply, closing her eyes for a moment. She'd known this day would come, but she hadn't expected it to feel so daunting. "Let me start by saying I never meant to deceive you," she began, leading him to the living room. "But yes, I am who that article says I am." Ethan sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. "So everything, the gifts, the rent, the job offers, it was all you?" "Not directly," Claire admitted. "My mother hired investigators and lawyers to discourage you from seeing me. But when I saw how much you were struggling, I couldn't stand by and do nothing. I wanted to help, Ethan. Not because I pity you, but because I admire you. You work so hard for Liam, and you deserve better than what life has handed you." Ethan shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You should have told me, Claire. All this time I thought we were equals, friends. But instead, you've been hiding behind your wealth while I kept wondering who was messing with my life." "I understand why you're upset," Claire said softly, her voice trembling. "And I don't blame you for being angry. But please believe me, I never wanted to hurt you or make you feel small. If anything, meeting you made me realize how shallow my world had become. You showed me what real strength looks like. That's why I wanted to support you, even if it meant keeping part of myself hidden." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Ethan studied Claire, searching for signs of dishonesty or manipulation. But all he saw was sincerity. A woman caught between two worlds, trying to bridge the gap without losing herself in the process. Finally, he spoke. "I get it, okay? I see why you did what you did. But here's the thing, Claire. I don't want charity. Not from you, not from anyone. If we're going to move forward, if you and I are going to move forward, you have to trust me enough to be honest. No more secrets." Tears welled in Claire's eyes as relief washed over her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me another chance." The next morning, armed with newfound clarity, Claire confronted her mother. Margaret had expected defiance, but she hadn't anticipated the quiet resolve in Claire's voice. "This ends now," Claire declared, standing tall despite the tension crackling in the air. "You can't control my life anymore, Mother. I won't let you dictate who I spend time with or how I choose to live. Ethan and Liam are important to me, and Sophie adores them. They're part of our family now, whether you approve or not." Margaret scoffed, though her usual bravado faltered under Claire's unwavering gaze. "You're making a mistake, Claire. People like him will only drag you down." "You're wrong," Claire shot back. "He's already lifted me up. For the first time in years, I feel alive. And if you can't accept that, then maybe it's time we reevaluate our relationship." Though their conversation ended in stalemate, Claire walked away feeling lighter, as if shedding years of guilt and obligation. She returned home to find Ethan waiting for her, Sophie and Liam giggling together in the background. "So, where do we go from here?" Ethan asked, a hint of nervousness in his smile. Claire took a deep breath, reaching for his hand. "We take it one step at a time, together." Over the following months, Claire and Ethan worked to build a future rooted in mutual respect and transparency. Claire used her resources responsibly, funding scholarships, renovating schools and creating job opportunities. Not just for Ethan, but for others in their community. Ethan continued working hard, teaching Liam the value of earning what you have while embracing the changes Claire brought into their lives. Their blended family thrived, with Sophie and Liam growing closer than ever. Holidays became joyful celebrations filled with laughter, love, and shared traditions. And though challenges remained, Margaret's disapproval lingered, and balancing different lifestyles wasn't always easy. They faced them together, united by trust and understanding. One snowy December evening, as they gathered around the Christmas tree, Ethan turned to Claire with a warm smile. "You know, I used to think happiness was about having stuff. Turns out it's about having people who care." Claire nodded, squeezing his hand. "And sometimes, those people show up when you least expect them." As snowflakes drifted past the window and the kids exchanged excited presents, Claire and Ethan shared a quiet moment of gratitude for second chances, unexpected connections, and the enduring power of love.